Zektar pressed his thin blue fingers against the observation deck's cool metal surface and watched the empty space where the humans would soon appear. His large black eyes reflected the distant stars as he tried to calm his nervous system. This was his 18th first contact mission, but something felt different about this one. The other Velthari crew members moved quietly through the corridors of their research vessel Harmony's Edge, their telepathic whispers creating a gentle hum in his mind. The humans were late. Ambassador Quinville floated beside him, her crystalline body catching the starlight in beautiful patterns. She had handled 47 first contact situations and never showed concern, but today her thoughts carried a strange tension that made Zektar's head ache slightly. The Velthari were naturally peaceful beings who had evolved on a world with no predators, no wars, no real dangers except occasional weather changes and solar flares. They approached every new species with curiosity and kindness, believing that intelligence naturally led to peace. The humans requested this meeting location specifically, Quinville said, her voice like soft chimes in the quiet observation room. Kepler's rest station sits exactly between their space and ours. They wanted neutral ground. Zektar nodded, though something about that request bothered him. Most species were eager to visit coalition ships or invite diplomats to their homeworlds. The humans seemed careful in a way that felt unusual. Their messages had been polite but brief, their language precise without being warm. When the coalition had offered to meet near their planet Terra 3, the humans had politely declined and suggested the abandoned research station instead. "Have you reviewed their cultural files?" Quinville asked. "Yes, though they were surprisingly limited," Zektar replied. "They sent basic information about their biology, some historical records and examples of their art and music, but they avoided detailed discussions of their government structure or military capabilities." "Military?" Quinville's thoughts carried surprise. Why would a peaceful species developing space travel need detailed military information? That question had been troubling Zektar since he first read the human files. Every species the Coalition had encountered had either evolved past the need for organized violence or had never developed it in the first place. The idea that an intelligent species might still maintain active military forces seemed almost primitive. Yet the humans had mentioned their defense forces several times in their communications. Always in passing, always without detail, a soft alert chimed through the ship's communication system. "Human vessel detected approaching from Vector 77 Alpha," announced the ship's artificial intelligence. "Estimated arrival in 43 minutes. Zektar moved to the long-range sensors and began studying the approaching ship. What he saw made his throat tighten with confusion. The human vessel was enormous, nearly twice the size of Harmony's Edge, but its design was unlike anything in Coalition records. Most peaceful species built ships that looked like works of art, with flowing curves and decorative elements that showed their culture's values. The human ship looked purely functional, with hard angles, thick armor plating, and what appeared to be multiple weapon ports along its hull. "Are you certain this is a diplomatic vessel?" Zektar asked the sensor operator, a gentle Silthara named Vindos. The humans identified it as the Defiant Spirit diplomatic mission primary, but ... Vindos paused, his crystal body dimming slightly. "The sensor readings are very unusual. This ship appears to be designed for both exploration and combat. I have never seen such a combination." Quinville floated closer to review the sensor data. "Perhaps they come from a dangerous region of space. Some species must build defensive capabilities to protect themselves from natural hazards like asteroid fields or radiation storms." Zektar wanted to agree, but something deep in his mind whispered warnings. The Velthari had evolved strong survival instincts despite their peaceful nature, and those instincts were telling him that the approaching humans were fundamentally different from every other species he had studied. As the human ship grew closer, more details became visible. The hull bore scars that looked like battle damage, though they had been carefully repaired. Strange symbols and markings covered various sections, and Zektar could see what appeared to be launch bays for smaller combat vehicles. This was not the ship of a peaceful exploration fleet. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," announced the communications officer. "Put it through," Quinville ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the human. "Ship's bridge." Zektar's breath caught in his throat. The humans looked nothing like their official portraits. They were taller than expected, with broader shoulders and more muscle mass than seemed necessary for a spacefaring species. Their eyes were smaller than most intelligent species, but they moved constantly, scanning everything with an alertness that reminded Zektar of the hunting creatures from his homeworld's ancient history. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Defiant Spirit," said the human in the center of the screen. His voice was deeper than expected, with an accent that suggested authority and experience. "We're requesting permission to dock at Kepler's rest station for the scheduled diplomatic meeting." "Permission granted, Captain Morrison," Quinville replied warmly. "We look forward to welcoming humanity to the galactic community." The human captain smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, Ambassador. We're honored by this opportunity." He paused slightly. "We'll have a small security detail with us, standard protocol for diplomatic missions in unknown territory." Security detail, another term that made Zektar's instincts whisper warnings. No coalition species had used armed guards for diplomatic missions in over 300 years. As the Defiant Spirit began docking procedures at the ancient research station, Zektar watched the human crew move through their ship. They worked with efficiency that impressed him, but also with a constant awareness of their surroundings that seemed almost paranoid. Every human he observed carried themselves like they expected danger at any moment. "Their ship's power signatures are very unusual," reported the sensor operator. "They appear to have multiple redundant systems for everything, including life support, navigation, and ... He paused. Weapons control. Weapons control?" Quinville's confusion was clear in her telepathic emissions. Why would a diplomatic vessel need such extensive weapon systems? Zektar didn't answer because he was beginning to suspect something that frightened him. These humans weren't just another peaceful species reaching for the stars. They were something else entirely, something the Coalition had never encountered before. They looked at the universe with the eyes of beings who expected threats around every corner, who prepared for battles that might never come, who carried themselves like warriors even when extending hands in friendship. The docking procedures completed with mechanical precision. In a few minutes he would meet these strange beings face to face and begin the process of determining whether humanity deserved membership in the peaceful coalition of worlds. Somehow, Zektar suspected that the real question wasn't whether humans deserved to join them, but whether the coalition was ready for what humans might bring to the galaxy. Zektar stood in the docking bay of Kepler's rest station and watched the human airlock cycle open with a soft hiss. The first person to step through was a woman wearing a dark blue uniform that looked both formal and practical. Her hair was pulled back in a tight style and her eyes swept the entire docking bay before she smiled and walked toward the coalition delegation. Behind her came Captain Morrison and 3 other humans, all moving with that same careful awareness. That made Zektar's nerves tingle. "I'm Lisa Ward, diplomatic representative for humanity," the woman said, extending her hand toward Ambassador Quinville. "We appreciate the Coalition's willingness to meet with us." The greeting seemed normal enough, but Zektar noticed how the other humans positioned themselves around Ward, creating clear lines of sight to all entrances without appearing threatening. Their movements looked casual but felt calculated in a way that made his telepathic senses pick up undercurrents of constant readiness. "Welcome to Coalition space," Quinville replied, her crystalline form reflecting the station's soft lighting. "We hope this meeting will be the beginning of a long friendship between our peoples." As the formal introductions continued, Zektar found himself assigned to shadow 2 specific humans during the cultural exchange phase. Dr. Amy Foster was a scientist with kind eyes and an easy smile who seemed genuinely excited about meeting alien species. Colonel Ryan Brooks was introduced as a military advisor, though Zektar wasn't entirely sure what that meant in the context of a diplomatic mission. The three of them walked through the station's corridors toward the designated meeting rooms, and Zektar decided to start with simple questions about human culture. Dr. Foster, what can you tell me about your species' development? How did humans achieve space travel? Amy's face brightened with enthusiasm. Oh, that's quite a story, actually. We've always been curious about what's beyond our world. Even when we were still developing basic tools, humans looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. She paused thoughtfully. Of course, it wasn't always smooth progress. We had some setbacks along the way. Setbacks? Zektar asked. Colonel Brooks made a sound that might have been laughter. That's one way to put it. We had a few world wars, some near-extinction events, the usual growing pains. Zektar stopped walking. World wars? You mean conflicts that involved your entire planet? Well, not the entire planet each time, Amy said casually. The first big one involved maybe 30 countries. The second one was more widespread. Then we had what we called the Cold War, which was more of a standoff than actual fighting, though there were plenty of smaller conflicts during that period. The casual way she discussed planet-wide conflicts made Zektar's mind reel. In coalition history, the largest conflict ever recorded involved a trade dispute between two cities that lasted 6 months and resulted in 4 casualties. How many of your people died in these wars? Amy and Ryan exchanged a look. It's hard to get exact numbers, Amy said carefully. The Second World War alone probably cost around 70 million lives. But that was decades ago. We've learned a lot since then. 70 million? Zektar's legs felt weak. The entire Velthari population was only 40 million individuals. These humans had lost nearly twice that number in a single conflict and spoke about it like ancient history. But surely your species evolved past such violence once you developed advanced technology, Zektar said hopefully. Ryan Brooks cleared his throat. We try to handle things peacefully when possible. But sometimes you run into problems that can't be solved with words. When someone threatens your family, your home, your way of life, you do whatever it takes to protect them. They entered a comfortable meeting room with large windows showing the stars beyond. Amy began setting up a display showing human art and culture, while Ryan stood near the window with that same alert posture Zektar had noticed earlier. Even in a safe diplomatic meeting, the human remained ready for something to go wrong. Tell me about your homeworld, Zektar said, hoping to steer the conversation toward safer topics. Earth is beautiful, Amy said with genuine warmth. We have vast oceans, mountain ranges that stretch for thousands of kilometers, forests full of incredible creatures. But it's also dangerous in ways that shaped us as a species. Dangerous how? Natural disasters mostly. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, ice ages. Every few million years something happens that wipes out most life on the planet, but somehow life always finds a way to come back stronger than before. She showed him images of Earth's landscapes, and Zektar had to admit they were breathtaking. Your planet tried to kill you repeatedly and you just adapted to it? Ryan nodded. That's basically human history in a nutshell. Planet throws everything it has at us. We figure out how to survive it, then we use what we learn to handle the next crisis. Makes you tough. Amy pulled up historical records showing human development over thousands of years. Zektar watched in fascination and growing horror as she cheerfully described ice ages that lasted centuries, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years, asteroid impacts that created global disasters. Through it all, humans had not just survived, but continued to grow, learn, and develop new technologies. Here's something interesting, Amy said, showing him a chart. Most of our greatest technological advances happened during or right after our biggest challenges. Space technology really took off during the Cold War. Medical advances accelerated during epidemics. Communication technology improved during conflicts when we needed to coordinate across great distances. I mean, humans develop faster when you're threatened? Necessity is the mother of invention, Ryan said with a slight smile. We do our best work when our backs are against the wall. Zektar tried to process this information. The coalition species had developed slowly over millions of years in peaceful environments. gradually building their civilizations through careful planning and cooperation. Humans seem to leap forward in sudden bursts driven by desperation and the need to overcome deadly challenges. "What about your philosophy?" Zektar asked. "How do humans view the universe and your place in it?" Amy considered this carefully. "We believe in making our own way. The universe doesn't owe us anything, and it's not going to take care of us. If we want to survive and prosper, we have to earn it through our own efforts. We have a saying, God helps those who help themselves, and if helping yourself requires fighting, then you fight," Ryan said simply. "We don't enjoy it, but we're good at it when necessary. Every human child grows up learning that freedom isn't free, peace must be defended, and sometimes good people have to do terrible things to protect what matters most." Zektar felt a chill run through his body. These weren't the words of a peaceful species reaching for the stars. These were the words of survivors who had clawed their way up from a world that had tried to destroy them countless times, and who expected the universe to be just as hostile as their homeworld had been. As the cultural exchange continued, Zektar began to understand that humanity's greatest strength and most terrifying quality were the same thing. They never gave up. No matter what the universe threw at them, they found a way to not just survive, but to become stronger from the experience. It was admirable and frightening at the same time. The emergency alert came without warning, its harsh red light flooding the meeting room where Zektar sat with Dr. Amy Foster and Colonel Ryan Brooks. All three of them looked up as the station's communication system crackled to life with urgent voices speaking in overlapping languages. Zektar's translator struggled to keep up with the rapid reports coming from different coalition worlds, but certain words came through clearly: attack, invasion, casualties, retreat. Ambassador Quinville's voice cut through the chaos over the intercom. "All personnel report to the main briefing room immediately. We have a situation developing in the outer colonies." Zektar felt his heart racing as they hurried through the corridors. Emergency situations were rare in coalition space, usually limited to natural disasters or equipment failures. The panic in the voices he had heard suggested something much worse. Around him, coalition personnel moved with obvious distress, their thoughts creating a telepathic storm of fear and confusion. That made his head pound. The humans walked beside him with that same calm alertness they had shown since their arrival. If anything, they seemed more focused now, their movements becoming even more precise and controlled. Dr. Foster's earlier warmth had been replaced by a cool professionalism that reminded Zektar uncomfortably of how she had described humanity's response to crisis. They entered the main briefing room to find it filled with representatives from a dozen different coalition species. The large display screen showed a map of coalition space with several systems marked in angry red. Admiral Threndos, a tall Salthara with deep blue crystal formations, stood at the front of the room with his usual composed demeanor cracked by obvious stress. 3 hours ago, our monitoring stations detected multiple large vessels entering coalition space from the Galactic Rim, Admiral Threndos announced. These ships ignored all communication attempts and proceeded directly to the Kepler-7 system. They attacked our colony on New Vega without any warning or demand for surrender. The display changed to show grainy footage from the attack. Zektar watched in horror as massive organic-looking ships descended on the peaceful mining colony. The vessels moved with predatory grace, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with sickly colors. Energy beams lanced down from the ships, destroying buildings and infrastructure with methodical precision. The attackers appear to be a previously unknown species we are designating as the Kethver, the Admiral continued. They demonstrate advanced biotechnology and show no interest in communication. Early reports suggest they are harvesting both resources and population from the colonies they attack. Harvesting population. Zektar's stomach turned as he realized what that meant. The Coalition had never encountered a species that took sentient beings as resources. Even their most primitive member species had evolved past such behavior before achieving space travel. New Vega had a population of 2.8 million, Admiral Threndos said quietly. As of 30 minutes ago, all communication with the colony has ceased. Long-range sensors show the Kethver ships moving toward the Altair system, which has 12 million residents. The room erupted in panicked voices as representatives from different species began talking at once. Zektar heard suggestions for immediate evacuation of all outer colonies, appeals for diplomatic contact with the Kethver, and requests to contact the mysterious ethereal consortium that occasionally mediated galactic disputes. Every suggestion focused on avoiding conflict rather than stopping the attackers. Through the chaos, Zektar heard Captain Morrison's voice cut through the noise with startling clarity. "What are their numbers and capabilities?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the human captain, who stood with his arms crossed and his expression completely calm. His question was so different from the coalition's focus on evacuation and diplomacy that it took Admiral Threndos a moment to respond. "We estimate approximately 40 vessels of various sizes. The largest appear to be over 2 kilometers in length. Their weapons seem to be bioplasma-based, and their hulls show remarkable resistance to our defensive systems." "Defensive systems?" Colonel Brooks asked. "What kind of defenses do coalition worlds maintain?" Admiral Threndos looked confused by the question. "Standard planetary shields, automated warning systems, and evacuation protocols. We have never needed anything more aggressive since the coalition was formed." Captain Morrison exchanged a look with his diplomatic team that made Zektar's telepathic senses pick up something cold and calculating from their thoughts. "You don't maintain any military forces? Military forces?" Ambassador Quinville floated closer, her crystalline body dim with confusion. "Captain Morrison, the coalition has maintained peace for over 400 years. We have no need for organized violence between civilized species." "But what about uncivilized species?" Dr. Foster asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Zektar realized with growing horror that the coalition had never considered the possibility of encountering a truly hostile species. Their entire philosophy was built on the assumption that intelligence naturally led to peaceful behavior. They had no protocols for dealing with beings who attacked without cause, took prisoners without negotiation, and showed no interest in diplomatic solutions. "We need to evacuate the remaining outer colonies immediately," declared Representative Velthane from the Cetacean Collective. "If we move quickly, we can save millions of lives." "And then what?" Captain Morrison asked. "These Kethver will follow the refugees deeper into coalition space. Eventually you run out of places to retreat." "Surely they can be reasoned with," suggested another representative. "No truly intelligent species would continue such senseless aggression once they understand our peaceful intentions." Lisa Ward stood up slowly, her diplomatic smile completely gone. "Captain Morrison, may I have permission to speak freely about human experience with hostile forces?" The captain nodded grimly. "In human history, we have encountered many groups that could not be reasoned with through peaceful means. Sometimes predators see peaceful intentions as weakness to be exploited. Sometimes aggressors view retreat as invitation to continue attacking. And sometimes the only language a hostile force understands is superior force applied with absolute determination." The coalition representative stared at her in shocked silence. The concept of meeting force with force was so alien to their thinking that many of them seemed unable to process what she was suggesting. "Admiral," Threndos cleared his throat nervously, "surely you are not suggesting armed conflict? The coalition has no capacity for organized violence. We would not even know how to begin such an undertaking." Colonel Brooks stepped forward. "Admiral, how fast can your ships reach the Altair system?" "Our fastest vessels could arrive in 18 hours, but the evacuation ships would need at least 36 hours to remove the population." "The Kethver will be there in 12 hours, Captain Morrison said after consulting his wrist device. "Those 12 million people will be dead or captured before your evacuation ships even launch." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Zektar watched the coalition representatives struggle with a problem their entire civilization was unprepared to handle. They faced an enemy that could not be negotiated with, bribed, or convinced to leave them alone. Their only options were to abandon millions of their own people or find some way to fight back against forces they did not understand. "There might be another option," Captain Morrison said quietly. His words carried a weight that made every being in the room focus on him with desperate attention. "But it would require the Coalition to accept help from people who understand violence in ways you never wanted to learn." Zektar stood in the shuttle bay of the Coalition evacuation fleet, watching the organized chaos around him with growing dread. Despite every protocol and safety regulation, he had insisted on joining the rescue mission to New Haven Colony. As a diplomatic observer, he needed to witness how humans would handle their first real crisis alongside Coalition forces. What he saw preparation for made his telepathic senses scream warnings. He didn't fully understand. The Coalition ships moved with their usual careful precision, following evacuation procedures that had been refined over centuries of dealing with natural disasters and equipment failures. Transport vessels arranged themselves in perfect formations, while shield generators powered up to protect the fleeing civilians. Everything followed the standard pattern of rescue operations that had saved millions of lives from solar flares, asteroid impacts, and system failures. The human ship Defiant Spirit moved differently. Zektar watched through the shuttle's viewport as the human vessel broke away from the Coalition formation and took a position between the evacuation fleet and the direction the Kethver ships would come from. Its hull seemed to ripple and shift as hidden weapon systems emerged from concealed ports. Gun turrets extended from sections that had looked like simple hull plating, and launch bays opened to reveal rows of small fighter craft that definitely had not been mentioned in any diplomatic files. "This is Captain Morrison to all Coalition vessels," came the announcement over the communication system. "We are detecting multiple Kethver bioships entering the system. Estimated arrival at New Haven in 47 minutes. All civilian transports should begin evacuation immediately." Admiral Threndos responded with confusion clear in his crystalline voice. "Captain Morrison, your vessel appears to have activated weapon systems that were not declared in your diplomatic documentation." There was a pause before Morrison replied. "Admiral, those systems were classified as defensive equipment. We hoped we would never need to use them, but circumstances have changed." Zektar felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized the humans had been prepared for exactly this kind of situation from the moment they entered Coalition space. Their careful positioning at neutral meeting sites, their security protocols, their questions about Coalition military capabilities, all of it suddenly made terrible sense. Dr. Amy Foster sat across from him in the shuttle, no longer the warm scientist who had enthusiastically shared human culture. Her friendly demeanor had been replaced by focused concentration, as she worked on a portable computer that definitely looked more advanced than anything she had shown during the cultural exchange. When she noticed him watching, she offered a brief smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry you have to see this side of humanity so soon," she said quietly. "We really hoped our first contact would be under better circumstances." "What exactly are you preparing for?" Zektar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "War," she replied simply. "The Kethver have made their intentions clear. They take what they want and kill or capture anyone who gets in their way. That means they need to be stopped before they can do more damage." The shuttle's pilot, a nervous Velthari named Jintar, turned from his controls with obvious distress. "Dr. Foster, surely there must be some way to negotiate with these beings. Violence only leads to more violence." Amy's expression softened slightly. "Jintar, I understand your perspective. Humans used to think the same way in our early development. But sometimes you encounter forces that see negotiation as weakness and mercy as invitation to continue their aggression. The Kethver have already shown they're not interested in talking." Through the viewport, Zektar could see New Haven growing larger as they approached the colony world. What should have been a routine evacuation was turning into something none of the Coalition species had experienced in living memory. The planet's surface showed clear signs of Kethver attacks, burning cities, destroyed infrastructure, and what looked like massive organic structures being grown from the wreckage. Coalition vessels, this is New Haven ground control, came a desperate voice over the communications. We have approximately 8 million civilians in secure shelters, but the Kethver bioships are systematically harvesting populated areas. They're not just destroying buildings, they're taking people. Admiral Threndos responded immediately. Ground control, we are beginning evacuation procedures. Estimated time for complete civilian removal is 14 hours. Admiral, Captain. Morrison's voice cut in with cold precision. Long-range sensors show Kethver reinforcements arriving in 6 hours. We don't have 14 hours? The communication channel filled with panicked voices as coalition commanders tried to find ways to speed up their careful evacuation procedures. Zektar listened to suggestions for overloading transport ships, skipping safety protocols, and abandoning non-essential personnel. Every idea focused on saving as many lives as possible while accepting that millions would be lost. There's another option, Morrison said when the channel finally quieted, but it requires engaging the Kethver directly to buy time for the evacuation. The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Threndos speaking with obvious reluctance. Captain Morrison, the Coalition cannot authorize aggressive action against another species. Our entire philosophy forbids organized violence. Then don't authorize it, Lisa Ward's voice joined the conversation. Consider this a human response to an unprovoked attack on innocent civilians. We're not asking the Coalition to participate in combat operations. Zektar felt his breath catch as he realized what the humans were suggesting. They were offering to fight the Kethver alone, without Coalition support or authorization, purely to protect people they had just met. The concept was so foreign to Coalition thinking that most of the alien commanders seemed unable to process what they were hearing. Captain Morrison, Admiral Threndos said carefully, your single vessel cannot possibly engage 40 Kethver bioships and survive. Probably not, Morrison agreed with disturbing calm. But we can make them pay a price for taking this world, and we can buy time for your evacuation ships to save more lives. Dr. Foster looked up from her computer and met Zektar's eyes. This is what humans do when innocent people are threatened. We might not be able to save everyone, but we try to save as many as we can, and we make sure the attackers know there will always be a cost for targeting the defenseless. Through his telepathic abilities, Zektar could sense something emanating from the human minds around him that he had never encountered before. It wasn't the panic or despair that filled the Coalition personnel. It wasn't the cold calculation he might have expected from warriors preparing for battle. Instead, he felt something that made his entire body tremble with instinctive recognition. It was the absolute certainty of predators who had decided to hunt. The humans weren't just preparing to defend the evacuation fleet. They were preparing to hurt the Kethver so badly that other hostile forces would think twice before attacking Coalition worlds. They were transforming from the curious diplomats he had been studying into something that his species' deepest survival instincts recognized as the most dangerous thing in the universe. Intelligent predators with a cause they were willing to die for. As the Defiant Spirit moved into attack position and the first Kethver bioships appeared on the edge of the system, Zektar realized he was about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The peaceful Coalition was about to learn that sometimes salvation came from beings willing to become monsters on behalf of those who couldn't protect themselves. The first Kethver bioship emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare-given form. Zektar watched from the shuttle's viewport as the massive organic vessel unfolded itself against the stars, its hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The creature ship was easily 3 times the size of the Defiant Spirit, with tentacle-like appendages that writhed through space and weapon ports that glowed with sickly green energy. More ships followed, their alien forms blotting out sections of space as they moved toward New Haven with predatory grace. Zektar counted 12 of the massive vessels, supported by dozens of smaller biocraft that darted between them like parasites around their hosts. The Kethver fleet was a living thing, breathing and shifting as it approached the helpless colony. World. All Coalition vessels maintain evacuation operations, Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication system. His tone was completely calm, as if he were discussing routine maintenance instead of facing overwhelming odds. Defiant Spirit will engage the enemy fleet to buy time for civilian extraction. Zektar pressed his face against the viewport and watched the human ship accelerate toward the approaching biofleet. What he saw next would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Though not for the reasons he expected, the humans didn't just fight the Kethver. They hunted them. The Defiant Spirit moved through space with fluid precision, its weapon systems tracking and firing with mechanical efficiency. But there was something else in how it moved, something that made Zektar's telepathic senses recoil. An instinctive terror. The human ship moved like a predator that had found prey, like something that had evolved specifically to kill and was finally allowed to do what it was born for. Energy beams lanced out from the Defiant Spirit's hidden weapon arrays, striking the lead Kethver bioship with surgical precision. The organic vessel's hull erupted in gouts of flame and biological fluid, but instead of retreating, it moved to attack with its own weapons. Green plasma bolts streaked toward the human ship, only to splash harmlessly against shields that shimmered and adapted to each impact. How are their shields holding? Dr. Foster asked someone over her communication device. Zektar hadn't even noticed her talking to the Defiant Spirit's crew. The Kethver weapons cut through Coalition defenses like they weren't even there. Adaptive armor plating, came Colonel Brooks' voice from the human ship. We analyzed attack patterns from New Vega and modified our defensive systems accordingly. Human engineering principle number 1. Learn from every fight and make sure you're harder to kill next time. The conversation was casual, almost conversational, as if adapting to alien weapons and surviving impossible odds was just another day's work for the human crew. Zektar felt his worldview cracking as he realized that everything about human culture and history had been preparing them for exactly this moment. The Defiant Spirit released a spread of small craft that Zektar initially mistook for escape pods. Only when they began attacking the Kethver ships with coordinated precision did he understand they were fighters piloted by humans who had volunteered to fly directly into enemy fire to protect people they had never met. One of the Kethver bioships managed to land a direct hit on the Defiant Spirit's port side, tearing a massive hole in the hull and sending debris spiraling into space. Zektar expected the human ship to retreat, or at least pause to assess damage. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the bioship that had wounded it. Captain Morrison, your ship is severely damaged, Admiral Threndos called over the communication system. You should withdraw for repairs. Negative, Admiral? We still have main engines and forward weapons. The evacuation is incomplete. What happened next made Zektar understand for the first time what Dr. Foster had meant when she talked about humans doing their best work when their backs were against the wall. The Defiant Spirit didn't just continue fighting despite its injuries. It became more dangerous. The human ship began using tactics that no Coalition species would have ever considered. When a Kethver bioship moved to intercept an evacuation transport, the Defiant Spirit rammed it at full speed using its own hull as a weapon to cripple the enemy vessel. When surrounded by smaller biocraft, human fighters didn't retreat but instead flew directly into the enemy formation, accepting their own destruction to clear the path for civilian ships. This is Transport 7, came a panicked voiceover. The communication system. We have a Kethver bioship moving to intercept. Our shields won't hold against their weapons. Transport 7, this is Colonel Brooks. We're inbound on the interceptor. Continue your evacuation run. Zektar watched a small human fighter craft streak toward the massive bioship threatening the civilian transport. The fighter was tiny compared to its target, no bigger than a lifeboat compared to a warship. Logic said it couldn't possibly damage such a massive enemy vessel. Logic was wrong. The human fighter didn't attack the bioship's heavily armored sections or try to match its overwhelming firepower. Instead, it targeted the creature's sensory organs with precision strikes that blinded and confused the organic vessel. When the bio-ship tried to shake off its tiny attacker, the fighter used its superior maneuverability to stay in the enemy's blind spots while continuing its surgical attacks. By the time the bio-ship realized what was happening, its navigation systems were destroyed and it was drifting helplessly while the civilian transport escaped to safety. The human fighter pilot had turned a hopeless situation into a victory through superior tactics and willingness to accept incredible risk. But what terrified Zektar more than the human's tactical brilliance was what his telepathic abilities were picking up from their minds during the battle. He had expected to sense fear, desperation, or the wild emotions that came with fighting for survival. Instead, he felt something cold and focused that made his entire body tremble with recognition. The humans weren't afraid. They were angry, not the hot rage that led to mistakes and poor decisions, but the cold fury of protectors who had found someone threatening innocent people under their care. Every human in the battle radiated the absolute certainty that the Kethver had made a fatal mistake by attacking defenseless colonies and that they would pay for that mistake regardless of the cost. "Dr. Foster," Zektar whispered, his voice barely audible over the communication chatter. "What are you?" She looked up from her computer, and for a moment he saw past her friendly scientist persona to something deeper and infinitely more dangerous. "We're the species that survived everything our homeworld could throw at us," she said quietly. "We're the people who learned that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to be very, very good at hurting those who threaten them." Through the viewport, Zektar watched the defiant spirit continue its impossible fight against overwhelming odds, buying precious time for millions of civilians to escape, while human fighters sacrificed themselves to protect transport ships they would never see again. He was witnessing the birth of legends, watching ordinary people transform into something that would be remembered across the galaxy for as long as sentient beings told stories about courage and sacrifice, and he was finally beginning to understand what it meant to be human. The silence after battle felt heavier than the chaos that had come before it. Zektar sat in the damaged shuttle as it drifted through the debris field that had once been the Kethver biofleet, watching pieces of organic ships and human fighters tumble slowly past the viewport. The evacuation of New Haven was complete. 7.8 million civilians safely aboard coalition transport ships. But the cost of that victory lay scattered across space in fragments too small to identify. The defiant spirit hung motionless against the stars, its hull breached in dozens of places and its weapon systems dark. Zektar could see human crew members in environmental suits moving across the ship's exterior, working to repair critical systems with the same methodical precision they had shown during the battle. Even in victory, even with their ship nearly destroyed, they continued to work as if expecting the next crisis to arrive at any moment. "Transport Alpha 7 to all Coalition vessels," came Admiral Frendo's voice over the communication system. "Casualty reports are coming in from the evacuation fleet. We lost 3 transport ships and approximately 2,000 civilians during the extraction. However, nearly 8 million lives were saved thanks to the actions of our human allies." Allies. The word carried weight that Zektar was only beginning to understand. The Coalition had never needed allies before because they had never faced enemies. Now they had both, and the galaxy would never be the same. Dr. Amy Foster sat across from him in the shuttle, no longer the warm scientist or the cold tactician he had seen during the battle. She looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness, her eyes holding shadows that spoke of choices no peaceful species should ever have to make. When she noticed him watching, she offered a small smile that carried genuine sadness. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said quietly. "We hoped our first contact would show you the better parts of humanity. Art, music, science, exploration. Instead you saw us at war. Was that really humanity at war?" Zektar asked. "Or was that something else?" Amy considered the question carefully. "That was humans doing what we do when people we care about are threatened. We become something dangerous to protect something precious. It's not separate from who we are, it's part of the same nature that creates our art and drives our exploration. Through the shuttle's communication system, Zektar could hear reports from the surviving human crew members. They spoke with professional calm about casualties, damage assessments, and repair priorities. 37 human fighters had been lost during the battle, along with their pilots who had flown directly into enemy fire to protect civilian transports. The humans spoke of their dead with quiet respect, but without the overwhelming grief that would have paralyzed a coalition species. "How do you bear it?" Zektar asked. "How do you function after losing so many of your people?" "We remember why they died." Colonel Brooks' voice came over the communication system as he reported to Captain Morrison. "They died protecting innocent people who couldn't protect themselves. That gives their sacrifice meaning, and meaning makes the pain bearable." The communication channel crackled as Captain Morrison addressed the coalition fleet. "Admiral Threndos, we need to discuss what happens next. The Kethvar sent a probe ship during the battle that escaped back to their territory. They know about coalition space now, and they know we're here to defend it." "Captain Morrison," Admiral Threndos replied with obvious reluctance, "the Coalition Council will need to review this entire situation. We have never dealt with aggressive species before, and we have no protocols for ongoing military cooperation. Admiral, with respect, you don't have time for lengthy reviews. The Kethvar will be back, probably with more ships and better preparation. The question is whether the Coalition wants to be ready for them, or whether you want to keep running until you run out of places to retreat to." Zektar felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized the conversation was about more than just the Kethvar threat. The humans had shown the Coalition that the galaxy contained forces that couldn't be negotiated with, bribed, or convinced to leave peaceful species alone. They had also shown that those forces could be defeated, but only by beings willing to fight with the same ruthless determination the enemies brought to battle. Dr. Foster pulled up a display on her portable computer showing the battle statistics. "In 4 hours of combat, we eliminated 12 major Kethvar bioships and 37 smaller craft. Based on the probe ship's transmission patterns, we estimate the main Kethvar fleet contains approximately 200 vessels. The mathematics are not encouraging for long-term defense." "What are you suggesting?" Zektar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The Coalition needs to decide what kind of galaxy it wants to live in," Amy said simply. "You can maintain your peaceful philosophy and hope that hostile forces will eventually leave. You alone, or you can accept that sometimes peace must be defended by people willing to fight for it." The shuttle's communication system activated with an incoming message from the Defiant Spirit. "Dr. Foster, this is Captain Morrison. We're receiving priority communications from Earth Command. They want a full tactical assessment of Coalition space and recommendations for defensive preparations." "Understood, Captain. Should I assume this means humanity is committed to ongoing protection of Coalition territory?" "Dr. Foster, the Kethvar attacked innocent civilians without provocation. As far as humanity is concerned, that makes them our enemies regardless of what the Coalition Council decides. We don't abandon people who need protection." Zektar closed his eyes and tried to process what he was hearing. The humans weren't asking for permission to defend Coalition space. They were informing the Coalition that they intended to do it anyway, with or without official approval. The concept of taking responsibility for the safety of strangers was so foreign to Coalition thinking that most species would need years to understand the implications. "There's something else you need to understand," Amy said, meeting Zektar's eyes directly. "What you saw today wasn't humanity at our most dangerous. That was humans protecting people we just met. If the Kethvar threaten Earth, or if they harm Coalition worlds under our protection, you'll see what we become when we're really angry." The statement wasn't a threat or a boast. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the same calm precision the humans had shown throughout the crisis. They were giving the galaxy fair warning that the sleeping predators had awakened, and that anyone threatening the innocent would discover exactly why humans had survived everything their homeworld could throw at them. As the evacuation fleet began the journey back to Coalition space, Zektar realized he needed to write a report that would fundamentally change how every species in the galaxy understood their place in the universe. The Coalition had gained protectors who were forged in violence but chose to build civilization, who could become monsters to defend the innocent, who carried the capacity for both creation and destruction in the same hearts that beat with genuine compassion for strangers. He understood now what Dr. Foster had meant when she said humans did their best work when their backs were against the wall. They had just shown the galaxy that sometimes the wall wasn't behind you. Sometimes you had to become the wall that nothing could pass, standing between the darkness and the light, holding the line until the innocent were safe. The day Zektar stood with humans, he learned that fear wasn't always something to be avoided. Sometimes fear was the beginning of wisdom, the recognition that the universe contained forces that required equally powerful forces to balance them. And sometimes the most terrifying thing in the galaxy was exactly what you needed on your side. When everything else failed,